Thank you, Francesco. Thank you, everybody, to be here. I hope uh, this talk is interesting. So, what I want to talk about is unlocking, so our efforts to unlock Agile and our local manipulation. Let's start. So, when when you see here this famous video from Boston Dynamics, what you can see here is an Atlas robot that is manipulating an object and doing some agile motion. It's very impressive, but still, Atlas doesn't understand objects. When Atlas is picking this object, Atlas already know, all the engineers develop this, already know the inertial properties of the object, and then embed this information inside the MPC approach. However, this is a limitation, and we want robots that doesn't have to, we don't want to tell robots what are all the properties of objects they want to use or manipulate. This is an example that we actually run to investigate the importance of doing this. So here, what you can see is our Go1 robot carrying on this payload. This payload is around 7 kilograms, so I think 60% of the weight of the robot. So it's a significant weight, and it doesn't know about that property. It doesn't know about the weight, and we run our full dynamics MPC at 50 Hz or 100 Hz, and still you can see a bad tracking. So you can see that the swing trajectories are not doing what we are expecting to do, and actually robot is crashing, and there, at some point it's gonna miserably fail. So understanding objects is important, even if you use fast MPC approaches. So which is probably not that clear. Now, there's different ways of doing this, of course. There's what I like to call bottom-up approaches, so machine learning, RL, et cetera. But in my talk, I'm gonna talk about top-down approaches. So top-down approaches are approaches that are from first principles of optimization, and physics. And let me explain you why I keep doing this. So as Andrea said, I believe that when you have constrained robotics and environment, so like this example here, animal have to transfer this very narrow stepping stone, RL it doesn't have any guarantees to do this task. So constraint is important, and it's a tool that we typically deal in numerical optimization, but not in RL. And we can also extend this with the concept of constrained robotics, is robots that actually have limits in actuation, kinematic limits, and they are limits that we have to consider. Another thing is because you can really use these top-down approaches to generate agile maneuvers. So I haven't seen any RL policy that can do this on a human robot. So we can really execute this type of agile maneuvers, and these approaches are also versatile. So I think model-based are still important, and actually, of course, we have to embed this, but I'm not really going to talk about this in this talk, unfortunately. So before talking about how we do this object-aware thing, I want just to later introduce you our perceptive locomotion pipeline, so you have an idea what we are running here. So our perceptive locomotion pipeline is basically, you have this terrain elevation map. We can semantically extract these footstep regions, and our task is to decide which region we have to select for making a footstep. The way we do this is using mid-sign integer. So, and we use this region of motion that you can see here in green, and the idea is to actually embed this Rayber heuristic, which is sort of in dynamics, simplified dynamics, to make quick decision on where we want to make a footstep. And or the region. When we do this, we actually replan trajectories to avoid obstacles, and we use this Rayber heuristic again. I'm not going to really explain you the details of this. You can go through that paper, Perceptive Locomotion, if you want to understand a bit more, because this is not the focus of my presentation. So what I'm gonna, when we have this footstep, what we do is a hybrid MPC approach. So a hybrid MPC is basically MPCs that use hybrid dynamics. So you have this diagram here where you can see our robot can be described through contacts and non-contact sequences and tasks we can define, and actually this looks like this. It is a problem that can be formulated in this way. You can use forward contact dynamics, you can use inverse contact dynamics, and you have these impulse dynamics that act as a reset mat between the modes. Obviously, for stability, you need to impose friction constraint, and to achieve the task, you need to have this contact placement constraint. This, although the MPC is not able to reason about contact, we can use these formulas to actually build many type of motions that you can see here in locomotion, but also in simple Loco-Manipulation tasks. More recently, I've been working in new extensions of our inverse dynamic solver. So here you can see a multiple shooting inverse dynamic. So it's actually, I'm not really presenting any details because I don't even have a document where you can find and read this. But basically, this multiple shooting is really solving these complicated tasks in few iterations. And they are complicated because I'm not really passing any information. So I'm really telling where, the moment that we have to make a contact and where, either with the feet or the hands and nothing else. So the behaviors that you can see here are actually come from first principles of optimization. So that gives a lot of room to optimize for the solver. And actually, if you use multiple shooting, you can really see the benefits of inverse dynamic. You can actually compute this solution in a quarter. If you don't use multiple shooting, probably you won't solve this problem. Now, why inverse dynamics is important? In a few words, it helps to distribute nonlinearity. So we have to decouple the inverse dynamics with the integrator. That helps to distribute the nonlinearities across these two functions, which is useful. Also, we don't have any tie relationship with the integration scheme where we can do some kind of course optimization, which might be also useful in practice. But another reason is they are cheaper to compute, the inverse dynamics and the derivative. And this comes from the rigid body theory, where you use these algorithms, and you can see here the algorithm complexity of forward, which is the ABA, and inverse dynamic, which is the RA and AA. And these are examples. So when we have constraint, this constraint environment or robots, so you can see how we can, with this inverse dynamic, we can transfer very complicated terrain. I just want to mention that this is Animal B. This is the old version of anybody's robot, which is not as strong as the newest one, and actually this task is very complicated. Same for this, because you can reach easily torque limits, you can reach easily kinematic limits, and then making this thing quite complicated to solve. Now, inverse dynamic, it actually doesn't fit really well as it does forward dynamics into optimal control formalins. And the reason is because in forward dynamics, you can actually embed these forward dynamics inside the integrator, and actually you can plot any kind of constraint using the Gauss principle of these constraint formalins, and this doesn't really, you don't really need any constraint handling. I mean, most of the, not any, but many of the constraints you don't need to handle in your optimal control, making this the optimal control problem very efficiently. Instead, in inverse dynamics, you need to consider a quality constraint, not just this dynamic constraint like the RNA algorithm. That means you need to augment your system with extra decision variable, the acceleration, and if you have to put some constraint, the story is worse. So like contact constraints. So you now need to amend with the contact constraint, something you don't have to do for forward dynamics. This in practice leads to 6,000 decision variables for our type of MPC problem, and actually increase a lot the computation time, because you can see we have much more decision variables to deal with. Here you can see example for inverse dynamic, how it can recover for a human robot. So this is an MPC simulation with the Nadia human robot from HNC. So we can generate this running jumps, running gait, or jumps very easily. So, and you have a sort of an idea how the MPC is converging with this posture. So everything you see here is the MPC is running and it's converging in the meantime. So we are not really passing any fancy Warren star or things like that. Now, how we solve this inverse dynamic problem efficiently? The first thing is to recognize inverse dynamic is actually this equation here. So what you can see, you have decision variable for the position, velocity, acceleration, torques, and contact forces. And if you assume this infeasibility of the inverse dynamic is equal to 0, you can actually condense those equations into this. Now we have get rid of the joint torques, the decision variables. We have to compute this selection matrix, yes, and there's a pseudo inertia, but it turned out that in many of the cases, this is one analytical solution, and you do one for everything, like in case of like a robot, like a system, or even quadrupters when you have thrusters. And that is actually reducing our problem complexity, but it still is large, and still we can do much better than that. For doing that, we have to first observe that solving this problem actually leads to solving this system of linear equation here, every node. So you have the typical, these quality functions that come from DDP, and now you can see you have these Jacobians H that represent the Jacobians of the quality constraint, a quality constraint that we use for model the inverse dynamic. Now, this is the problem we have to solve. It's larger, and we need to use, we can solve this with sort of a short complement approach, and actually we did in our paper as well. But you can also recognize that we can parameterize the controls using the null space and basis of as you can see, this null space parameterization. Now, if we embed that information inside the previous equation here, we can actually reduce the KKT system or this system of linear system of equation that we have to do. Now, you can say, well, what you need to compute is decompose the system, and that's expensive. But it is depending of H, and H are Jacobians that we can compute in parallel. That means we can compute these green terms that you can see here in parallel, and making actually sort of algorithm complexity for the backward path, which is a sequential, that have more or less the same dimension of the forward path. And actually it reduces quite a lot the algorithm complexity and enables our inverse dynamic MPC with our robot in real time. One of the things we always try to do is feedback MPC, because there are no holonomics in the system. And I'm not really gonna go through the no holonomics, but I invite you to go to the Weaver paper, which is very interesting. However, in inverse dynamic MPC, what we compute is policies on variables that we are not able to control. These are the generalized acceleration and the contact forces. One thing, what we want to do is actually to map this policy, local policy, into the joint torque space. And basically what we have to do is to do this decomposition of the inverse dynamic control policy around a linearization. So it's a simple composition, and actually we can build things like that. Why feedback MPC? Well, so when we talk about MPC, I think we have to think about numerical optimization before thinking about the control problem. And in numerical optimization, what you want to have is an algorithm that converges faster, and is around a basing of attraction. So as you can see here, I'm pulling the robot very strongly. I know it doesn't look like that, but I'm really doing that. And every time that I do that, the MPC is changing, making this step, as you can see, it's stepping back, and it's actually also numerically increasing the infeasibility of the problem, and this is sort of the plot you can see from this experiment. So the MPC is always infeasible, but always in a good basing of attraction, which is what it matters. So that's why I'm saying that when you talk about MPC, you should first think about numerical optimization and not the control aspect. And this is, you know, the main reason is with the non-holonomics, actually there's problems with tracking angular momentum. And this is the tracking of angular momentum of this experiment. It's not a simulation. It's quite impressive, to be honest with you. And this is because we have this feedback policy. And in other papers, we actually demonstrate and share information when we don't use the feedback policy, and actually how is the tracking, which is the joint torque tracking and the angular momentum tracking, and also the swing tracking are really, really bad. But that's the type of tracking everybody's getting, to be honest. So now I'm gonna go through this object-aware thing that I was talking about. So you can see here when we are able to identify this motion here, the weight of the object, we can actually achieve the task that we weren't able to do it before. How we do this? Well, we can do this with the formulas of moving horizon estimation or hybrid moving horizon estimation, because we can add, in estimation, we know where the robot, we assume we know when the robot is in contact, and we can use contact or dynamics or impulse dynamics as we did before for MPC, with a slightly different thing. So we are not really applying it. We know what the torque that we are applying, that's our measurement, and these are these U hats, as you can see, but we don't know the dynamics of the system, and we have to parameterize through this theta variable. And also the system might be perturbed, disturbed, then we have this W thing here. How we actually, and these are the dynamics we do. Another thing is we don't know really where the robot is. What we can have is a good approximation, so we can have the covariance or where we think we are, but we need to really figure out where the robot is. And also we have uncertainties. We don't know what are the perturbations, and what we have to do is to take a bunch of observations, all the ones we can. So these are observations like AMU acceleration or joint observation or any stereostatic sensing, embedded into this cost and actually with some covariance. So this is basically, as you can see, very similar to the MPC. It's actually a dual problem, moving horizon estimation, and it can be really solved with the same tools we saw before. I did not really explain so much before, but I'm gonna do a little here. The type of problem we are trying to solve is this KKT problem here. So it has, again, a block diagonal structure. We can use tools like DDP, or we can use tools like, where compute the third direction, any numerical optimization routine that have to compute the third direction. In case of DDP, we use a backward path, and also we can do forward rollouts to understand this. But now the problems that we are trying to solve here are problems that involve obviously Jacobians or Hessians with respect to the parameters. These are the terms that you can see here, and probably you can more or less have a good idea why there are these KKT come here. And sorry, I'm not really explaining this. We can also leverage ideas of multiple shooting, so to enhance convergence and to enable to solve problems like this. So here, what you can see is Atlas doing this backlink or frontally, and we have magenta bots. We don't know what it is. And then we are taking measurement, and we are estimating that bot with, which is represented with the blue blobs that eventually becomes green. When it becomes green, it means we really got a good solution. And actually, we are displaying this for the whole motion, but you can indeed compute this in a few iterations. Actually, the solution is much faster, but it's just for visualization. And these are other type of things we can do. We can identify payloads where the robot is going through bars, and this is possible because our multiple shooting approach, which I'm sorry, I'm not really explaining. But to leverage efficiency, we want to always have fully physically consistency. And in a minute, I'm going to explain what I mean with this. But why we need this? Because when we compute derivative, analytical derivative, we need to do things like mass inversion. And when we do that, we perform Cholesky decomposition for efficiency, and the Cholesky require fully physically consistency. And how we can do this? Well, let's first investigate what is fully physical consistency in inertia. So an inertial parameters are 10 parameters that describe a body inertia. So these are the mass, the barycenter, and the rotational inertia, and typically expressed in the body coordinates, but you can map into the barycenter coordinates, which probably is always more useful because they have more physical meaning, in my opinion. And what you really need to satisfy for having parameters that are fully physical consistent is that the mass is positive, and the second moment of inertia are positive. And the second moment of inertia can be actually compute when you do this singular value decomposition of the rotational by inertia IZ. And as you can see, this is a singular value decomposition. Recently, there's an approach that is actually parameterizing this. It's called Loco-Manipulation parameterization. It's a smooth manifold, but it has some undesired properties. And we actually develop in this paper an exponential eigenvalue, and I'm gonna really go through the description of this thing. But before going that, so these are the type of thing we can actually do multi-contact inertial estimation of multiple bodies. So here you can see we are identifying the payload, we are identifying where the object that we are grasping and different properties, and this is, this can apply to any type of robot actually. So the smooth manifold, this Loco-Manipulation is a parameterization proposed by Rocker and Wensi. It's actually a very interesting work, I have to confess. And what they do is basically they first write the spatial algebra into a pseudo inertia. As you can see here is this J matrix. And the condition for fully physical consistency is basically having this matrix, having a matrix that is semi-defined positive or defined positives. One observation is you can do Cholesky or Loco-Manipulation. So Loco-Manipulation is a Cholesky with positive diagonal values, and you can see here this upper triangular matrix U, and these are parameters that they propose to basically build based on the idea of decomposing the matrix. And when you decompose the matrix with the Loco-Manipulation, by construction, you are always guaranteed that, independently of the value of the parameters you can see in pi, you're always guaranteed the full positive defined condition of this matrix, or the fully physical condition of the parameters. So in short, the Loco-Manipulation parameterization, it has a singularity free, it's very highly nonlinear, but it doesn't have, it has an algebra, but it's complex to compute. For the sake of my presentation, I want to say it doesn't have algebra, but yeah, it's not really rigorous. So, but it's really complicated to do that. And I'm not going through that. But what you can see is you can do a singular value decomposition. You can come back from the spatial algebra description that I start with. So where you have the rotation matrix, you have this diagonal L represent the second moment of inertia. And what you can do is to observe that to build a Lie algebra of this, you have to guarantee these three manifold conditions. The third one is the classical spatial orthogonal manifold condition, and the other ones are conditions that we are proposing, but actually they are very simple to compute. Why they're very simple to compute? Because we can easily buy analytical expression for the exponential map. That's the main thing. For the Loco-Manipulation, it's very complicated to compute the exponential map, but for our case, it's very simple. So because you can use a classical exponential function for the mass or for the second moment of inertia. In the case for the rotational matrix, you can use the classical exponential map of Lie spatial orthogonal groups, which have an analytical solution as well. And obviously, we can also compute the log mac, and we can go back and from the tangent space to the configuration manifold very efficiently. So this is good. This is why we developed this. And I will say that we have a Lie algebra here, or a Lie algebra that is easy to compute, to be more rigorous. It is not less highly nonlinear, but it's still singularity free. Now, I didn't explain what is singularity free. What I mean with singularity is when we see this plot of this particular parameterization, you can see that you have a singular point when the second moment of inertia in x or y are equal, or z. So these are basically the singularities we get in the Jacobian, which is actually a problem in numerical optimization. This is, for example, in this case, when we have a sphere, we have this type of problem. However, we can leverage numerical optimization. We can actually use null space parameterization to deal with this problem. I'm not really explaining and going through the equation how we do this, but you can go through our paper. And actually, we can solve this type of problem with the null space parameterization. And you can see, because there's less nonlinear, we can actually solve a bunch of problems much faster than with the Loco-Manipulation parameterization. So it's a good thing. Then the other thing I want to just briefly, for people doing localization, is to the idea of embracing dynamics in estimation. So when we have to perform an agile motion like this jump, you can see here that the Pronto, the unextended Kalman filter using kinematic, it miserably fails. It's not able to predict the flying phase, and this is something very useful for agile. And now, here we are not using any stereosceptive information, making the problem very hard. This is all encoders and IMU. Unfortunately, the video. Let's play the video. I don't know what you can see in the top. So it's our method is actually really making a good job, and the Pronto is horrible. It's useless in practice for this type of problem. And here you can see a plot where we show how fast is our system. So this ain't my talk. I want just to summarize with some take-home messages. So leverage full dynamics. In MPC, moving horizon enables agile and object-aware behaviors. One huge demonstration was done by Boston Dynamics, obviously. So you can see we also can do some agile motion as well. Exploiting the temporal structure is important in MPC. But in moving horizon estimation, also exploiting the parametric structure is important. I didn't go through, but it enables the real-time application. Ensuring fully physically consistency every time in every iteration, it was important for us to achieve real-time computation or to achieve fast computation of analytical derivatives, because we leverage things like Cholesky decomposition when we compute this thing. Fully physically consistency in inertia actually has this Lie algebra. I think it's a concept that haven't been reported in other papers as far as I know. But it's beautiful because it brings some other tools for us to deal problems in model-based like we did, but also in model-free approaches or data-driven approaches. So with that, I conclude my talk, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you very much. It's time for a question now. Someone have? All right. Can you use the? I'll shout. Oh, perfect. That's okay.
What do you do about the triangle inequality for the inertia?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So when I was saying the second moment of inertia has to be positive, it's actually that triangular inequality constraint. And what I do Lie algebra. So I optimize over the tangent space, and when I grab this into the manifold, I'm actually satisfying the triangular inequality. So you don't use it. You don't have to. Actually, it's much better. You don't have to use these inequalities and complicate your life with inequalities.
Could you go to slide 13?
Yeah, sure. Okay, slide 13. Yes.
Yes. So you said that this H term, HID,
Yes.
you're assuming that it is 0. What's inside the term?
So because this is a linearization, it's basically, it's an infeasibility. You take your state and controls, and you compute something, it should be 0, but it not necessarily is 0. And what we are doing here is making 0 that component, and then.
So these are higher order terms.
Yeah, you can see they have higher order terms, yes.
Or things that should vanish, like.
Also, they should vanish in convergence, yes. They should be 0.
Okay, I'll ask you in person afterwards, I
Yeah.
guess. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks a lot for the presentation. So I really like your comparison between MHE and AKF, because I find it usually really difficult to have an MHE outperforming an EKF.
Which model did you use for the EKF to see this huge gap in performance?
Sorry, can you repeat the last?
So which
Bit-
model did you use for the EKF such that you can
Yeah,
really see this
so
gap?
we use Pronto. Pronto it used to be the state of the art in for-legged robots. It was developed by Maurice Fallon when he was in MIT, and now he's associate professor in Oxford. Pronto, you can delve into the details of Pronto, obviously, but Pronto is using kinematics. It's called leg odometry.
I see. But so did you include the fact that you have contact and no contact?
Yes, yes, of course. We include the fact. But the problem, I mean, Pronto works really well when you have always at least one contact. When you're in a flying phase, a kinematic model cannot do anything about really predicting well the behavior of the robot.
Okay. Have you tried also to compare with a dynamic model?
Yes, the dynamic model, we use the dynamics in our approach. That's what we call ours in this video here. And it's using the entire full dynamics of the system, rigid body dynamics.
Okay, but also for the EKF or?
No, we did not really test from EKF. That actually will be a good, interesting comparison, but we haven't done because we did not develop Pronto.
Okay, thanks a lot.